What goes up must always come down, and hip-hop bears no exception to that expression. In the 50 plus years that hip-hop's been around, we've seen some of the most insane career runs from rappers who have sold hundreds of millions of singles and albums, made hundreds of millions of dollars. But no matter how big or successful any rapper has become, their career always ends in the same way, with a fall-off. So in this video, we're going to discuss the biggest fall-offs in hip-hop, but let me be very clear. The definition of a fall-off is a decrease in number, amount, intensity, or quality. While there's rappers like Lil Pump or Fetty Wap who have experienced massive fall-offs due to the sharp decline in their musical quality, a fall-off doesn't necessarily have to be attributed to the magnitude of success or admiration that your music once had that it now no longer does. A fall-off could be intentional. A rapper could decide that they want to fall off or step back from the limelight or success that they once had. And while we've definitely seen some embarrassingly sharp declines in musical quality from several rappers throughout history, we've also seen some of the biggest legends in the game fall off for much different reasons. So in this video, we're going to discuss 3 of the biggest fall-offs of all time, and again, their fall-off is most definitely not necessarily attributed to the quality of their music. So with that being said, the first rapper on our list today is Andre 3000. And just in case you guys didn't know about 3 Stacks, let me give you a little history lesson, alright? See, Andre was one half of arguably the biggest and easily the best rap group of all time, Outkast. It was Andre 3000 and Big Boy, and together these guys inspired the entire next generation of hip-hop, blending funk, jazz, soul, electronic, and rock production with sophisticated subject matter on social issues, political commentary, and more. And the craziest part is Andre was just over 20 years old, making some of the most groundbreaking hip-hop music of all time with albums like Aquemini or Southern Playalistic Cadillac music. They also had some of the biggest rap hits of all time with songs like Miss Jackson and Hey Ya. And because of Outkast's catalog, many regard Andre 3000 as one of the best rappers of all time. So Big Boy and Andre 3000 dropped music together as Outkast for almost 10 years, from 1994 till 2003. And while they didn't break up in 2003, they technically dropped their own solo albums as a double album under the Outkast name. It was called Speakerbox / The Love Below, and the Love Below disc was Andre's own solo album. Now, commercially, that was their biggest project, selling over 13 million copies. But after releasing the project, we didn't hear from the two for another 3 years, when they dropped their final project together in 2006. Now, at this point, Big Boy was talking about doing his own solo music, so the world figured that Andre 3000 would do the same. But he did the opposite. We never got that solo album from 3 Stacks. Instead, he did a couple of features throughout 2007 and 2008, and he launched a few new business initiatives like his own cartoon show on Cartoon Network called Class of 3000, which the main character was a superstar and school teacher, and the character was actually voiced by Andre himself. He also launched his own fashion line called Benjamin Bixie, and he had several acting roles in movies like Four Brothers, Idlewood, Be Cool, Revolver, and TV shows like The Shield and American Crime. So as you can see, Andre was pretty much focused on everything but the music. And unfortunately, his TV show and clothing line didn't end up reaching the same success level as his music, with his show getting cancelled and his clothing line losing millions of dollars. But Andre kept the same attitude and approach towards any artistic endeavor he ventured into. When he was asked about the failure of the clothing line and how it costed him personally millions of dollars, Andre said, "Unfortunately, I lost millions, to be honest. It was an expensive lesson, but I can tell you, it was the best times, the best lessons in my life about myself and creating things." Now, it's been almost 20 years since we got the last Outkast album. And while Andre 3000 still does the occasional feature, rapping is definitely not his main focus right now. But he actually is quite still active in music. Nowadays, you can catch him playing the flute in local venues, and he actually just dropped a flute album with no vocals, no rapping, nothing on it, just him playing the flute. People were surprised because we waited decades for a solo Andre 3000 album, and when we got it, there was not one bar on it. But when Andre does rap, it's very obvious that he hasn't lost his touch. His skill set has not declined in the slightest. There's no doubt that a new Andre 3000 album would be incredible and would arguably be the biggest comeback in all of hip-hop. But his fall-off was intentional. He doesn't want a massive comeback or anything that comes with the success of being a huge rapper in 2024. In the end, what separated Andre from other artists was how he approached anything he created. He wasn't doing it for the accolades, the acclaim, the sales, the money. He created what moved him and didn't force anything just because it's what the people wanted. He made that very clear when he was asked if we'd ever get another album from him. He said, "It's really just an excitement thing and where I am in life. I kind of like not being part of rap, now that I've done it. As I get older, I start to see myself move more back from it. The hustle and bustle of putting out an album, the pressure of being in the studio trying to come up with something. Now it's more like a hobby for me, so I don't think about it in that way. Even with Outkast, if we never do another album, I'm totally fine with that." Andre's creative output is based on inspiration and collaboration. He said himself, "I work better with other people. I clearly see that now. Like, I haven't put out an album in years, but if Frank Ocean or Travis Scott calls and says, hey man, I want you to be a part of this, it's like I have a goal, a target. When I'm on my own, I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs like, I'll do it tomorrow. It's different. There's a kind of certain magic when you work with other people. So while it is sad to know that we might never get an extended solo project from him ever again, it is refreshing to see someone at the top of their game stay genuine to what they want to do and not get swayed by any ulterior motive like money, fame, or public perception. While Andre's heart is currently not embedded in the sport of rap, which caused him to leave the genre at the height of his career, same can be said for the next legendary rapper on this list, which is Lil Wayne. See, similarly to Andre 3000, Lil Wayne was on the top of the rap game and pushed the boundaries of what a typical artist should and could sound like. He had one of the most legendary runs from 2006 to around 2010, where he was on top of the game, selling 1 million copies in the first week, not once, but twice, killing every feature he was on, doing like hundreds of features every single year. And he really inspired the rap game, the next generation, to flood the market, put out as much content, as much music as you possibly could, and just sharpen your skills, sharpen your pen with every new project, new song that comes out. Wayne also changed the way we consume mixtapes. His model was, if I hopped on your song, I would make it my own, meaning that he would take your beat and just destroy it so badly that people wouldn't even remember the original version. He put out dozens of mixtapes and laid out a blueprint for next generation to copy. Everything from his look, the dreads, the face tats, the style, the out-of-this-world energy, the abundance of projects. Nowadays, it seems normal for rappers like Lil Baby, Young Thug, or Future to drop an album once or twice a year. But that model and a lot of their style would not be possible without Lil Wayne doing it first. So needless to say, Wayne was not only one of the most influential rappers of all time, but sales-wise, he was also one of the most successful. In 2008, he sold 1 million copies in the first week with his album The Carter 3. And after tons of features and success, he decided he was going to pivot and start making rock music. Now at the time, this kind of seemed like an odd move, right? Why would the biggest rapper at the time do a complete 180 and switch genres and start making music with a sound he's never incorporated before? However, given the context of where hip-hop was at in 2008 and what Wayne had already done in his career, this move actually kind of made sense on paper. It was an interesting risk to take. He already massively incorporated autotune into his raps, stretching out his vocals to produce these hypnotic, gargly, drugged-out sounding melodies that, again, became the blueprint for sounds that Future and Young Thug have incorporated into their music. And with Kanye West also pivoting more into R&B with his album 808s and Heartbreak, it only seemed right that Wayne pushed the boundaries of hip-hop and ventured into a new sound where he could leverage that auto-tune crooning that he was already known for in a completely new and revolutionary way. Plus, he had groups like the Beastie Boys who had already incorporated rock into their music, so again, this could have been a massive success on paper. Plus, at this point, every venture or artistic direction that he took was successful, right? He ventured into autotune, that was very successful. He ventured into mixtapes, that was extremely successful. When he ventured into creating a label, that was the most successful venture, arguably, that he's ever initiated. But something was different about this Rebirth rock album. The punchlines weren't as sharp, the song structure wasn't as strong as his previous work, the use of autotune wasn't as smooth. Kind of just sounded like a lot of rock production with him kind of just yelling over autotune on these beats. And while I still personally go back to some of these songs on this project, at the time coming off the massive critical acclaim he received with The Carter 3, many critics and fans alike thought that Rebirth was his worst album to date, and what most would consider the beginning of the fall-off for Lil Wayne. But his passion and work ethic most definitely was not gone, and neither was his skill set. He proved that when he dropped the mixtape No Ceilings right before Rebirth, where he used his same model of taking your favorite rapper's beat and making it his own, with punchlines and energy and delivery that was as strong as ever. And as you followed Wayne, that you knew that he was in the studio 24/7, so one bad album in Rebirth did not necessarily mean that it was completely over for him, just because of the sheer volume of music that he produced and recorded. But his dedication to the craft and the quantity of music that we received from Lil Wayne wasn't necessarily the reason for his downfall. It was actually the exact opposite. Wayne would go on to flood the early 2000s with project after project, dropping a whopping 5 albums and 5 mixtapes between 2010 and 2015. That's 2 projects per year, and honestly, with each one, it sounded less and less inspired than the last one. Now, don't get me wrong, Weezy had some incredible moments like his 2011 run with The Carter 4 and Sorry for the Wait. But by the time we got to Sorry for the Wait Part 2 or No Ceilings Part 2, he didn't sound like that same rapper who took your beat and made it his own. The flow sounded stale, he sounded a lot less inspired, and in my opinion, he wasn't necessarily pushing the boundaries the same way he was in 2008, where he was kind of dictating what the sound of hip-hop would be. Instead, it sounded more like he was playing catch-up with the biggest artists in the game. For example, on his older mixtapes, he would always take a beat and add his own flows to it, his own melodies, his own hooks, his own punchlines, his own verses. But on more recent mixtapes like No Ceilings 2, he was basically just taking the framework of the original song and kind of freestyling over it. There wasn't as much originality, it almost just sounded like he was doing his best impersonation of whatever artist's beat belonged to originally. Now don't get me wrong, growing up in the 2000s, Lil Wayne to me will easily go down as one of the most influential rappers of all time, and for nostalgia purposes, easily in my top 5 best rappers of all time. He absolutely revolutionized the game and also opened doors for guys like Drake, who by 2015, I believe we're just overshadowing Wayne in terms of musical quality and obviously success. And his downfall could be attributed to a number of reasons. Similarly to Andre 3000, Lil Wayne pursued some other passions and hobbies. He became super into skateboarding and sports in general. He even started his own show back in 2012, which a lot of people don't remember, where every Sunday he would just basically talk about sports highlights. And around that same time, a lot of fans thought all the skateboarding he was doing and the people he was hanging out with because of the skateboarding he was doing was leading to his subject matter and just music in general sounding less inspired and lower in quality. Like maybe he wasn't in the studio enough because he was just skateboarding too much. So there could be a number of reasons for his downfall, but I don't think skateboarding is the case. Really, I think what led to Lil Wayne falling from being the biggest and best rapper alive is the whole situation between him and Birdman. Now, if you guys didn't know, Birdman is the founder of Cash Money Records, which owns Young Money, and Lil Wayne was signed to Cash Money Records for basically his entire career. When Lil Wayne started Young Money, him and Birdman split the profits of every artist on the label, 51% going to Birdman and 49% going to Lil Wayne. Now, Young Money birthed some of the biggest artists of all time like Drake, Nicki Minaj, and Tyga. So you can imagine the profits from their music and the money that Young Money was generating was probably very substantial, hundreds of millions of dollars. And in 2014, around the same time that basically public perception was Lil Wayne kind of fell off in terms of musical quality, he also announced that he was suing Birdman and Cash Money for $51 million due to payments that Cash Money failed to make to Lil Wayne over profits from artists like Drake, Nicki Minaj, and Tyga. And this was a super sad time as a Wayne fan and just for Wayne's career in general. If you guys don't remember, back in 2014 when he announced that he was suing Cash Money and he wanted it off of their label, he also threatened to retire. And if you kept track of Lil Wayne's career back in like 2008 when he was on top of the game, this was the last way that you'd ever expect him to go out. I mean, the biggest rapper in the world wasn't allowed to release their music and their profits were being kept from them. It didn't make sense. And it also didn't make sense that Wayne wanted to retire just based off the sheer absurd amount of time that he constantly spent in the studio and the amount of music that we constantly received from him. So it really begs the question, where would Wayne's career be today if all of this never happened? I mean, sure, he eventually settled his lawsuit with Birdman and he dropped his anticipated album, The Carter 5, 4 years after he initially announced it in 2014. And to this day, he still drops projects pretty consistently and he still absolutely bodies feature verses. But unfortunately, it's been many, many years since Wayne had his own solo hit song, and his latest releases feel like they just kind of come and go. The subject matter isn't as exciting as it once was, and with most of his peers like Nas, Jay-Z, Kanye, and even Drake exploring new business ventures later on in their careers, bringing them in, hundreds of millions of dollars outside of music, it's sad to see that Lil Wayne had not taken that same path, as he introduced the world to one of the most successful rap labels of all time, but ended up getting shorted for a lot of the earnings that that label brought in. And at this point, instead of just focusing on business ventures or putting out, like Jay-Z does, a very high quality album every couple of years and still receiving that critical acclaim from his fans and the culture, at this point, Wayne kind of finds himself releasing a lot of music that lacks the staying power or impact that his older music had. And now again, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Lil Wayne fan and I definitely don't think it's over for Lil Wayne. But if he keeps releasing projects with the same level of quality as stuff like The Fix Before the Six, Polygrove 2, or No Ceilings Part 3, these are all the projects he's released in the 2020s decade, it begs the question, will he be able to ever regain the dominance he once had in the culture? His fall off is a weird case, right? Because just based off the influence and innovation he's brought to the game, he will always be regarded as one of the best rappers of all time. And based off the volume of music that he continues to constantly record, he'll always throw out the phenomenal verse occasionally and still sound inspired on certain tracks. But for someone who was continuously selling millions of copies with every album he released, even when he put out that rock album that everyone hated, because of how big of a name Wayne was, that album still ended up going platinum and selling a lot of records. Again, just off the sheer impact he's had in the past and off his name alone, there will always be a soft spot in the culture for any new Wayne project that comes out. But it's unfortunate to see that with the level of motivation and drive that he still has to go in the studio every single day and the volume of music that we still get from Lil Wayne, it's odd to see him not more successful today and selling a fraction of what he was selling even 10 years ago. Now, obviously, again, sales isn't everything. I'm just happy to see Wayne still active in the game. But if you look around, all of your favorite rappers were probably massively inspired by Lil Wayne. Everyone from guys like Young Thug, Baby, Gunna, Lil Uzi, Future, even more lyrical rappers like J.I.D., Kendrick, Denzel Curry, Chance the Rapper, like all these guys have attributed a lot of their flow, their sound, their style to Lil Wayne. Young Thug's first commercial release was supposed to be called the Carter 6, and Lil Wayne hasn't even released the Carter 6 yet. And that's not even mentioning that he introduced the world to two of the biggest rappers of all time, Drake and Nicki Minaj. So my point is, based off how big he was in the past and how much of an influence he is to entire soundscape of current hip-hop, it's interesting to see that even with the magnitude, the level, the amount of music that we still get from Wayne, nothing seems to stick or have that cultural impact that it did 10, 20 years ago. But in my honest opinion, I just think that Wayne kind of lacks the direction right now to leverage his skill set as a rapper in the best ways possible. What I mean by that is his skill is still there, his inspiration is still there. There's a lot of feature verses where he's still rapping like the Rents do, he's still in punchlines at an elite level. We get glimpses of the 2007, 2008 Lil Wayne on a lot of feature verses that he releases today in 2024. So his fall off isn't attributed to the actual skill set that he possesses. He still has that same skill set that he had when he was in his prime. But I think that skill set would be better put to use with more of a focused direction. It seems like Wayne goes for quantity over quality, recording, hundreds of tracks every single month. And if he instead pulled a move like Nas did, where, if you guys didn't know, Nas basically teamed up with Hit Boy, and the two of them have dropped like 6 phenomenal records where Hit Boy's handling the production and Nas is rapping. And I think it's with that direction in the production that Nas was able to find inspiration to basically have a resurgence within his career and drop more music than he's ever dropped basically throughout his entire career. I would argue that in the 2020s, for some reason, Nas is more active than he was in any other decade. And the same could be said for Lil Wayne. Go look up any feature he's done with any of the Griselda guys like Benny the Butcher, Westside Gunn, or Conway the Machine. When Wayne is given a strong song concept and a beat that's literally just made for someone to go in straight bars and just be spitting, he takes full advantage of that and easily outshines whoever he's on the song with. Go and listen to the song Ritual by AZ and Lil Wayne, and you wouldn't be able to tell me whether that was a verse from when he was at the height of his career in 2007 or whether that was recorded last year. So again, Wayne still shows glimpses of his prime, still definitely has the skill set that made him the best rapper alive. I just think he needs to lock in with a producer or some artist who can help him kind of better leverage his skill set. Because while his skill set is still there, his albums have definitely been lacking in quality for the better half of almost 10 years now. While Wayne lacks the direction or potentially the business savviness that a lot of his peers have, he definitely still has the love for the game, and for that reason, he still gives us projects consistently. And in the future, with the right direction, again, I could see him giving us many projects that bring back the essence of what made him known as the best rapper alive at one point. But one person who I think may never give us an album again is the final rapper on this list, which is going to be 50 Cent. 50 is, again, another rapper who had one of the biggest fall-offs in all of hip-hop just because of how legendary and massive his run at the top was and he was in his prime. See, 50 Cent put out his debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, in 2003 and went on to sell millions and millions of records to the point where even Jay-Z, who was the top rapper in the game, warned his entire record label about the emergence of 50 Cent. Like, 50 had the entire rap industry shook at the time. Teaming up with Dr. Dre and Eminem, he was absolutely unstoppable, dropping hit after hit and beefing a lot of the biggest rappers in the game and ultimately winning almost every beef that he had been a part of. You're probably familiar with how brutally him and Eminem destroyed Ja Rule's career. Or 50's track How to Rob, which basically called out the entire industry. Again, what goes up must come down, and by 2007, 50 Cent was absolutely on top of the world. But there was another rapper who was challenging him for that top spot, and that was Kanye West. Both 50 Cent and Kanye West were scheduled to release their third albums in September of 2007. Kanye would be releasing Graduation, and 50 Cent would be releasing Curtis. In classic 50 Cent nature, he decided to challenge Kanye and move his release date to the same day as Kanye's release date for Graduation, basically challenged Kanye to a sales-off. 50 Cent publicly announced to the world that if Kanye West outsold 50 Cent's album in the first week, then 50 Cent would retire and never drop another album again. And sure enough, that's actually what ended up happening. Now, 50 Cent didn't retire, but Kanye West did massively outsell 50's album, with Graduation selling over 900,000 copies in the first week, and 50 Cent's album selling 600,000. This marked a very interesting time in hip-hop because it was kind of like a shift from gangster rap to more commercially accessible, quote-unquote, backpack-style rap. See, Kanye didn't have that tough gangster image. Kanye came up as the vulnerable college dropout who wore pink polos and was rejected from a lot of the industry, or at least put in a box as being, a very strong producer, but not someone that people were willing to give a chance to as a rapper, just because he didn't fit that classic archetype of a violent rapper who grew up in a certain lifestyle. But this is what the culture seemed to gravitate towards. Going back to earlier in this video, this was a sound and a style that guys like Andre 3000 really ushered in. See, at the time, rappers like Kanye West, Lupe Fiasco, and then later Kid Cudi, Drake, Wale, J. Cole became some of the biggest rappers, and they weren't known for being that tough guy. They would touch on larger social issues, well, not Drake necessarily, but if they didn't touch on that subject matter, they would get more personal and vulnerable with their emotions, which was definitely not something that 50 Cent was necessarily doing, or at least wasn't delivering it in the same sensitivity or vulnerability as guys like Kanye West were. So with Kanye West outselling 50 Cent in 2007, it marked a massive change within the soundscape of hip-hop. And with that, it also marked a massive decline, or at least just change within 50 Cent's career, right? I mentioned Curtis sold 600,000 copies in his first week, and while he lost to Kanye West, he also sold massively less than any other album he had in the past. His album before that, The Massacre, sold over 1 million copies in the first week, and his first album, Get Rich or Die Trying, sold over 800,000 copies in the first week. So while 600,000 was not a bad number per se, it was significantly lower than any other album 50 Cent had released. His beef with Kanye was also the biggest beef that he had publicly lost, even though it wasn't a real beef, it was more of a promotional tactic. But years later in 2009, he engaged in a very real beef with Rick Ross. And that was another beef that he arguably did not win, which again showed a change in the sentiment from the culture that maybe 50 Cent was not the #1 most dominant rapper in the game like he was just a couple years prior. Rick Ross and 50 Cent both dropped albums in late 2009, and both of them barely sold over 150,000 copies in their first week. Now for Rick Ross, this was in line with what his last few albums had done. But for 50 Cent, this was extremely low. Again, for context, his first album sold 800,000 in the first week, his second one sold 1 million in the first week, his third one, Curtis, sold 600,000, and then this one only sold 150,000. It was a very far drop, and for Rick Ross, who was consistently selling 150,000, this was actually a win for him in this beef because a smaller rapper like Rick Ross going up against a giant like 50 Cent, but still ending up selling as much as 50 Cent, showed that if the culture wasn't siding with Rick Ross, it was at least 50-50, no pun intended. And people definitely expected Rick Ross to either sell a lot less or fall off completely by going toe-to-toe against a guy like 50. But the biggest loss that 50 Cent took in his beef with Rick Ross is the fact that he leaked the X-rated tape of Lastonia Levinson, the mother of Rick Ross's child. But we'll discuss why that was such a big mistake later on in this video. But now the year is 2010 and 50 Cent is on a European tour. And while he vowed to retire in 2007 because he lost the beef to Kanye West, he definitely did not stick to his word as he released that project in 2009, which sold less than Rick Ross. And while he's touring Europe, he does an interview where he announces that he's working on a dance album titled Black Magic, which was inspired by European nightclubs. This was a weird move for 50 Cent, going from making strictly gangster music to switching his tempo, no pun intended, and completely switching genres. Kind of reminds me of when Eminem was beefing MGK, and after their back and forth, MGK took such a loss that he decided to start making punk rock music instead of hip hop. Not that 50 Cent took such a loss, and not that he hadn't incorporated melodies or singing within his music in the past, it just seemed weird that he was completely pivoting to a whole new genre, especially a genre as different to hip-hop as dance music is. Shortly after that, though, he canceled the idea of the dance album and changed the title to The Return of the Heartless Monster after he started writing different material for it, claiming that he wanted his album to now have the aggression of a Get Rich or Die Trying. Now, at this point, it kind of seemed like 50 Cent was at a fork in the road. He was confused on what his next move should be musically. He goes from the massive success of Get Rich or Die Trying, The Massacre, and Curtis, to then getting outsold by Kanye West, then by Rick Ross. Then he's kind of directionless in terms of what genre of music he wants to make, and never ends up releasing another album. But at the same time as 50 Cent's rap career was kind of falling off, he was making massive strides in his ventures outside of music. While he was at the top of the music game after Get Rich or Die Trying, in 2004, he also invested in a company called Glasso. Glaceau was the owner of the vitamin water drink, and 50 Cent became the spokesperson for their grape-flavored drink, which was called Formula 50, due to their partnership with the rapper. By 2007, thanks to their endorsement by 50 Cent, vitamin water became a massive success, and Coca-Cola bought their parent company, Glaceau, for $4.1 million. Now don't forget, 50 Cent was an investor in the Glaceau company. He wasn't just a spokesperson for vitamin water. So when Glaceau sold to Coca-Cola for $4.1 billion, 50 Cent earned around $100 million from the sale. It was with that massive amount of money that 50 Cent went on to start multiple different companies like SMS Audio Headphones, Sire Spirits Alcohol, and he even invested in and endorsed a luxury underwear company by the name of Frigo. He was focused on everything but the music, essentially. To bring it back to his first album, he got rich and then he stopped trying. But in 2015, we saw 50 Cent's return to music after 6 years when he dropped the album Animal Ambition. From a sales perspective, this album performed horribly, selling under 50,000 copies in the first week. Again, big fall off for a rapper who was once selling 1 million copies in the first week. But that absolutely did not matter, because at this point, 50 Cent was just doing music for the love of the sport. His money was coming in from his business ventures. However, in that same year, his success took a left turn, and 50 Cent ended up having to file for bankruptcy. This didn't mean that 50 Cent was broke necessarily, but he had to restructure his debts and basically clear losses from certain ventures that he had. At the time, he was ordered to pay $17 million to Sleek Audio for allegedly copying their headphone design. His headphone company also didn't end up performing as well as he thought, which caused him to lose money on that venture as well. And at the same time, 50 Cent was also sued by Rick Ross's baby mama, Lastonia Lesviston, for releasing her X-rated tape without her permission during his beef with Rick Ross. Consequently, 50 Cent was ordered to pay $7 million in damages to Levinson. Now, 2 years later, 50 Cent emerged from bankruptcy in 2017 after settling his debts. He agreed to a plan to pay back creditors over a 5-year period. His financial situation has improved drastically since then due to the massive success of his TV series Power and his alcohol business, Sire Spirits. It's now been over 10 years since we've got a 50 Cent album, as the rapper's focused on making money outside of the music. Ultimately, while he's no longer seemingly as inspired as he once was to dominate the culture with his albums, he still has a large pulse on the culture, executive producing albums by artists like Pop Smoke, or creating documentaries on artists like Diddy and selling them to Netflix. Again, his mind is on the money, and his focus is on the various different successful business ventures that he has outside the music. While both him and Andre 3000 left the rap game to pursue different business ventures, 50 Cent's trajectory went very differently from Andre's. Andre's motive was to follow whatever inspired him creatively, whereas 50 Cent was a lot more tactical and pursued ventures that would yield him the highest return on capital. While both 50 and Andre are more focused on their ventures outside of music, Lil Wayne is likely still active in the studio recording new songs every single day. While all three of these artists took different paths, stories draw a lot of similarities. They're some of the most legendary, influential, and successful artists of all time, but still left that #1 position within hip-hop to pursue different ventures. 50 Cent went on to produce TV shows and troll Diddy on Instagram. Andre 3000 went on to play the flute on street corners. And Wayne gave us Drake and Nicki Minaj and basically introduced the world to the next generation of hip-hop superstars. So while it's true that what goes up must come down, that's kind of the beauty of life and more specifically of hip-hop, right? Even though these three artists aren't as commercially dominant or just active in music anymore, without them, hip-hop would not be where it is today. While we typically look at an artist's fall off as a sad thing, we forget that many artists choose to fall off to pursue a bigger purpose. And if your purpose for being here is to hear stories of your favorite rappers, then hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.